Hi, Team Peridot. It's Cheryl Moore. I'm going to review chapters 14 through 17, Caring Enough to Lead by Pelliker. I apologize now. I'm having some asthma issues, so I'm hoping I can get through this video without coughing and clearing my throat too much. So chapter 14, Honey, do these pants make me look fat? I laughed when I read the title, and I was wondering, what in the world is this chapter going to be about? And so as I'm reading, and Pelliker talks about that kind of loaded question that we ask our significant others, do these pants make me look fat? And him talking about, what decision do you make? What do you say? You have to be careful because we kind of want to know the truth to that question, but we don't necessarily want to know the full truth to that question. And how do you, when you're thinking about that, your significant other, they're probably thinking in their head, how do I say the right answer? What is the correct answer? And he says, you always want to try and pick that answer that's not too harsh, that won't hurt her feelings, that's in that middle of that two extremes, because you don't want your wife or whatever to go out looking bad, but you don't want to think they look horrible either. And he says, sometimes there is no middle ground when making decisions. And he talks about when he was at a high school and he had a first-year teacher, master's degree in American Lit, and a senior tenured teacher that taught all the American Lit classes. He makes the decision to split those American Lit classes. And the high school teacher comes in very upset, and he yells at him, and why did you take my courses away from me? And he says, I didn't take them away from you. I decided to divide them. We have a first-year teacher with a master's degree in American Lit, and I want her to be successful. So we're going to divide them between the two of you. Well, of course, the tenured teacher is upset. Clearly, it was never discussed with him, but he's upset. And Pelliker says, well, what's the right decision? I had to make a decision. I have a new teacher. I want to be successful. And we know most teachers in their first year, if they don't feel successful, the rate of them going on to teach drops in our career field. And he said, I could have stayed loyal and been a friend and gave him all the lit and said, okay, I won't do that. But he didn't. He made a command decision. And he said it's hard to make a choice between something that's beneficial when both things are beneficial to get desirable outcomes. He said the most difficult decisions force leaders to choose not between right and wrong, but between right and right. So you have two right decisions. One decision, split it in half, or one decision, maybe give her something that she could easily do, like another top English class, and keep him with the lit class. Could they both be right? Possibly, but then you could have failure maybe on that new teacher's side. So he made a command decision. So how to choose between right and right? So you don't have a right and wrong necessarily, but a right and right. And this is, I think, a lot of we have to think about our leadership this way. And sometimes I think we don't. We think that there's just a right and wrong, but there are right and right answers. And he said we need to ask ourselves when we're making these informed decisions, will the course of the action be fair and just to all concerned? Is it going to be personally satisfying for me if I make this decision? So am I going to be biased? Is it self-promoting? Is it going to be culture acceptable or individually acceptable? Am I making this decision to make myself feel good, or am I making the decision based on maybe knowledge I have? Am I weighing both sides? Will it produce the greatest utility, minimize harm, violate a written or unwritten contract, meet an obligation, or violate a spoken or unspoken promise? Would we take the same action again? So he asks himself, would I make the same action again? Yes, because it was the right decision for both the senior teacher and the new teacher. And he said it's not enough to talk the talk, you have to walk the talk. And I think a lot of us realize this. And I think there's many challenges, in our lives and our careers that we do talk the talk and we don't walk the walk. And I think that's everyone. I think it's just human nature. So he's saying what we have to start doing is we have to actually walk the talk. You can't just say you're going to do it, but you have to actually do it and stick by it. In chapter 15, can I care enough to do the little things? So this one, when it's talking about the golf analogy, I was like, oh goodness, I don't know anything about golf. It's a stick hitting a ball. I play golf on the Wii. That's it. I don't know anything about golf. I can't even hit a real ball with a stick. But then, as I was reading it, and I'm thinking about it, and he talks about, well, I see these players, they're not pros, but wow, they look really good. And then I see these pros, and they look just as good, but they're getting paid. Well, why is that? What is the difference? What is making them better? Or why are they getting paid for it? Why are they exempt? And he said, it's the little things. And it's probably the little things that we don't see. So, and he says, well, what does it matter? The big things versus the little things. So what are the big things when you're looking at your job? Well, the big things are what? We show up to work on time, or we come to work. And, it's hard to call out. We all know that. Preparing your lessons, differentiating for your students, waiting outside your door to greet your students, right? Those are all the big things. These are the things that are required of us, that we do because we know they need to be done. But what are the little things? It's going the extra mile, things that aren't required, but things we do because we love our job. And I've always said that being a teacher is not a job. It's a lifestyle. My husband tells me all the time, turn the teacher off, turn the teacher off, turn the teacher off. But I can't. It's ingrained. And, going the extra mile can just be, I keep snacks in my room because sometimes kids hate the lunch. So I have a snack, or they didn't eat breakfast that day. They got their bus is always late. I need to give them something to eat because I want them to have a full tummy and be able to, participate in class. Taking them aside when they're struggling, or realizing something is off today. Their mood is just, something is wrong. Taking them out in the hallway and saying, tell me what's going on. It's that extra mile to show that I care, that I'm empathetic to their mood, and that I know something's off today. And I've told students, it's okay if you need to just sit over here to the side today and listen, because I can tell you're having a rough day. And those are the little things sometimes that show that child that you care and that you want to build that relationship with them. And his point is all these big things are required of us as teachers, as leaders, but it's the little things that are not required of you that make a difference. Like, I've even had my boss ask me, when I took a day off, do you feel better today? How are you feeling? There's a lot of us that work in that school, but she took the time out to come and see me to ask me if I was feeling better, knowing that I don't call out of work. I come to work when I shouldn't come to work, but she took the time out. And that to me was a little thing, and that made me feel appreciated. So one of the things I liked he had in there said, successful leaders recognize and appreciate the importance of the impact that little things can have on the overall health and vitality of an organization. They realize that by going beyond broad expectations and demonstrating commitment through performing small but significant acts of caring, they can build an environment that will bring out the best in everyone. So it's chapter 16. Can you just call me Willie, Miss Peterson? So we looked at that, and I'm reading about Muhammad Ali. And I think he was a pretty significant person in our history. I don't think anybody can really deny that. And it talks about him winning this gold medal and coming back during segregation. And I teach Georgia history, so I teach about segregation. And I really let my students watch different movies and things for them to get like an understanding of things, and movies based on real life. The fact that he had this gold medal around his neck and wanted to sit at a lunch counter, and they would not allow him. So he wins this gold medal, such a feat so few people in our world can do. Excuse me. And they wouldn't let him sit at a lunch counter to eat. And I thought that was really crazy. And so it really made me stop and think about what do we see when we look at our students? And it brings us back to earlier discussions about when we talked about like coworkers, and, if they're rude or they snap at you one day or they yell at you, are we really thinking about what they're going through or what their background is or what happened to them in the past that made them act that way or feel that way? So what do we look at when we look at our students in the face that day, or our coworkers? or even our administration sometimes. And I know my administrators sometimes have snapped at me, and I was like, oh, hello, I just came around the corner. I don't even know what happened. I'm like, okay, avoid you today. But I didn't stop to think maybe what had caused it. And do we see the outside of that person or what's going on? And Pellica reminds us that we really have no idea what anyone is feeling at a certain point unless we have been in their shoes. And do we really understand how difficult it is to read when our students are sitting there and they're reading and they're struggling? I've had students cry, and I've had to take them to the side and say, why are you crying? And I've had a student say, I can't read. Everyone else in the class can read. And mind you, I have 4 students in that class. And I said to her, I said, you can read. I said, don't let it get to you that they read higher than you. I said, because they rush through it and they may be able to read more words than you, or you may think they can read better than you. But when it comes down to it and they rush, they can't answer the questions any better than you can. And she really thought that she just couldn't read. And so, you got to stop and think. I have to put myself in her shoes, and how would I feel if everyone around me could do something and I couldn't do it? I don't look at the letters and they see jumbled up. I don't look at numbers and they float all around. I see the numbers and the letters, and I just like, okay, let me solve this problem. But I have to put myself in her shoes to see what she feels and how she understands it, versus me just saying, well, try harder, let's read more, let's do this. I really have to be empathetic and see the person for who they are. And when the teacher asked, Willie, well, what do you want to be called? Black, Negro, whatever. And he said, no, just call me Willie. Look at me. I'm a person. Just look at me. And that's what we need to do. We need to start looking at people for who they are and maybe what they've been through and what they're going through, not just the color of their skin or what we presume them to be. So chapter 17, how are schools transformed? Well, we talk about standardized testing in this chapter and children passing their work and not passing the tests. And we see this a lot. And it talked about no child shall fail. And what does that look like? And Pellicer talks about the school where they had that 98% pass rate and that 99% rate. But it was all about the school deciding to having a shared vision and a common purpose. And these beams of light radiating from the top down. And it made me think, if you don't have that, if you have one teacher that beams light, or 2 teachers, or 10 teachers that beam light, but it's not a common purpose across the school or across the staff, then you're not going to have that high percentage rate of passing, or that, and it's not even necessarily about just testing, it's just that positivity across the board. Your morale isn't good. So you want to have that beaming light. So it really made me stop and think about that common purpose. And are you getting that from your leadership, or is it just a few teachers here and there? And I know in my school, we've really tried to have a common purpose for our kids. And all the students in my school have an IEP. And our purpose is for them to be successful. We don't worry so much about them passing the test. We know a lot of them don't. And we have come to grips with that. We're more about them being successful and doing everything we can to have them read and write and be successful adults later in life. And we've came to have a common purpose and tried to all be shining beams of light for each other, from the top down and from the bottom up, in both places. So when I thought about all these questions, I really tried to, and I did take several from the chapters, but I really wanted to make sure that they were poignant and that we could really think about them. So the questions, Michelle, think of an occasion when you had to make a right versus right decision. What was the nature of the decision? What values were in competition? What did you ultimately decide? If you had to do it again, would you make the same decision today? Why or why not? Sheila, suppose you were given the opportunity to show your caring through the presentation of a beautiful crystal apple. I love this in a chapter. Someone who has been a special mentor in your life. To whom would you give it to? Why would you select this specific person? What did the person do for you that made him or her significant in your life? Marcy, As an educator, do you take into consideration the background of your students or caseload? How does this translate into a leadership role in adults you work alongside with each day? Anna, what messages has your leadership sent out to you, positive or negative? What messages are you beaming out in your interactions with others? And what would have to happen in your school to get all the messages from all the people on the same positive frequency? So I hope you enjoyed the review. I'm sorry it ran over a little long.